You're listening to the Friends Talking Nerdy Podcast Network.
Friends Talking Nerdy. If your friends are nerdy and you are nerdy too, I want to talk to you. Friends Talking Nerdy.
Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of Friends Talking Nerdy. This is Tim Jousma coming at you alone again this week. Once again, the Mr. and Mrs. Reverend Tracy are spending time with the kids for spring break, so wanted to make sure they had some time to be able to spend with them without having to worry about stuff like the podcast here, so I hope all that is going well for them. In the meantime, what are we going to do here this week? This week, we're going to have ourselves a tournament. I love watching YouTube channels, and one of them is on the Film Joy YouTube channel. It's Movies with Mikey film series, and they did a recent video which I really appreciated. He took a number of his favorite films, and because it being March Madness, he bracketed them and then argued them out until he was able to find his very favorite film of his own, and I thought that was a great idea, so I'm stealing it for an episode here. So what I've done, I've taken 16 of my favorite movies from all different genres, but again, these are my favorite movies, so if anybody's questioning why a certain movie may not have made the list, it's personal preference here. But what I've done is I've bracketed them. The qualifications I used for bracketing purposes was going by their final box office score. So if a particular movie is seated high, that is the only reason why. Of course, as we all know with movies, just because a movie makes a lot of money does not mean it's a quality movie. But again, I needed something to bracket these up. But let's go through our matchups here. We have the number 1 seed Avengers Endgame facing off the number 16 seed Army of Darkness. The number 8 seed Die Hard is going to be facing off against the number 9 seed Pulp Fiction. The number 4 seed The Matrix is going to be facing off against the number 13 seed Once Upon a Time in Mexico. The number 5 seed Spider-Man will face off against the number 12 seed The Blues Brothers. The number 2 seed E.T. will face off against the number 15 seed South Park Bigger, Longer, and Uncut. The number 7 seed Superman the movie is going to face off against the number 10 seed Kill Bill Volume 1. The number 3 seed Captain America the Winter Soldier will face off against the number 14 seed Apocalypse Now. And finally, the number 6 seed The Empire Strikes Back is going to face off against Goldfinger. And again, what I'm going to do for each of these matchups is give you a brief description of why I chose both of these movies, compare them two together, and then pick my favorite, and then go on to the next one. I'm not going to spend 20 hours here talking about one choice. Hopefully, if all goes well here, this should be something that should speed through and get us through an episode here rather quickly. So I say, let's dive into it. So the first matchup here, Avengers Endgame versus Army of Darkness. Avengers Endgame, I've talked about on Friends Talking Nerdy multiple times about how that movie was so emotional for me. Being there opening night, just being able to experience that crowd reacting like it was a sporting event for the big portal scene at the very end. Something I'll never forget, but something with Army of Darkness, though. I mean, I've talked about that show, that movie as well, and that certainly means a lot to me because, one, they mention my hometown, of course, but it's just one hell of a great story overall. I mean, it continues the Evil Dead story on, but it also is its nice little own standalone movie, too. You don't necessarily have to know the entire history of Evil's Dead 1 and 2 to really get an appreciation of Army of Darkness here. But if I had to pick between these two choices, as much as I love Army of Darkness, for this matchup, I have to give it to Avengers Endgame. So Avengers Endgame advances to the next round. Now, this one is going to be a tough one here. Die Hard versus Pulp Fiction. If push comes to shove and people ask me just what is my favorite movie, and I'm naturally going to say Die Hard. It's one of those movies that just even as a kid, I saw it and it was just like, this is good. But the same for Pulp Fiction as well. And the thing to remember with Pulp Fiction is that Tarantino, in a lot of ways, did for crime movies what George Lucas did for space operas. He took a genre that, had been successful to a point in Hollywood, but hadn't been treated with the scope that Tarantino had been able to do, similar to what George Lucas did with the space operas. Because, there had been space operas before, like Flash Gordon and whatnot, but it's not like Hollywood studios were putting a lot of time and money into making the best possible product. But once they found out what could happen when you do, hey, it stands as it is. So, boy, this is going to be a tough one here. Die Hard and Pulp Fiction. Personally, I gotta give it to Die Hard between the two. Pulp Fiction is not a bad movie at all, of course. This is my own personal preference here. I gotta give it to Die Hard. So the next matchup here, we got The Matrix versus Once Upon a Time in Mexico. The Matrix, I really regret not seeing in theaters when it first came out. It was 99, and I had a chance. It was a tough summer in 99 because I ended up not having enough cash to be able to go to the movies as much as I wanted to. And the one chance I had to go, I had a choice to either see The Phantom Menace or The Matrix. I chose The Phantom Menace because Star Wars. I didn't realize what The Matrix was, and I missed out on seeing that in theaters. But the other movie here, Once Upon a Time in Mexico, it's a Robert Rodriguez film. He has done some other bigger films. He's, like the Sin City movies. He also is part of the new Boba Fett show on Disney Plus. Boy, good choice between these two here. For me, I'm gonna have to go with The Matrix on this one. Once Upon a Time will always hold a special place in my heart, but I gotta be honest here. Between the two films, The Matrix is the one that hits a little more closer to home for me in terms of the better movie. Now, on to our next one here. We have Spider-Man versus the Blues Brothers. Now, Spider-Man, Blade is the movie that kind of opened the door for Hollywood to let them know that, hey, maybe there's a little more to these comic book movies than the X-Men came along and showed that, hey, you can do even more with comic book movies. But the one movie that really kicked the door in, that made Hollywood see that, comic books are here to stay, is Spider-Man, the first one with Tobey Maguire back in 2002, which is an absolute classic. And again, I've talked about that in Friends Talking Nerdy plenty of times in the past, so don't want to go too much into that, but it is a classic and a legendary film for a reason. Just casting alone, all those parts were cast to perfection. Willem Dafoe as Norman Osborn. You can't think of anybody different. Now, the other film here, The Blues Brothers, obviously it's not a comic book film, but in a lot of ways shares a lot of the same storytelling tropes. And what a soundtrack too. I think more than anything, what the Blues Brothers' lasting legacy is that they were able to give a voice to musicians that were kind of being overlooked at that particular time, and they were able to, thanks to John Belushi and Dan Aykroyd, Star Power, able to get some ears on some music that people were unfortunately ignoring at the time. So both are great movies here. For my purposes, between the two, honestly, The Blues Brothers for me is the one that's been the most influential one. And again, this is my choices, my favorite movie choices here. So Spider-Man is not a bad choice at all, of course, but it is what it is. Let's go on to the next one here. We have E.T. versus South Park Bigger, Longer, and Uncut. Now, E.T. was the first movie I ever saw in a movie theater in 82. I actually saw it in the movie theater with my grandmother. It was the year I was in kindergarten, and in a lot of ways, seeing that movie kind of did shape the experience of going to the movies for me. The types of movies I like are generally the escapist kind, and E.T. was the first one that kicked the door in. Now, for South Park, the Bigger, Longer, and Uncut, when that movie came out, that really kind of opened a lot of people's eyes to just how talented Trey Parker and Matt Stone were. The first couple seasons of South Park were funny, but not really deep, just like the movie showed. Now, obviously, with future seasons of South Park, we're in, season 25 right now. They've, shown their writing is beyond the pale. They're great writers. They're funny people and whatnot. But that movie was great to see. Of the two, I do gotta say E.T. gets my choice just for sentimental reasons. So let's move on to the next one here. We have Superman the movie facing off against Kill Bill Volume 1. I have a Superman tattoo, and that's because of the movie. I mean, again, casting-wise, Christopher Reeve as Clark Kent, you can't see anybody else in that role. It's like, Sean Connery with James Bond at this point. Other actors can play that role, but it's his. Kill Bill Volume 1, again, Tarantino did for action movies what he did for crime movies. He was able to take a genre of film, of action film, and not even an American version, and just make it epic in a lot of ways here. So between the two films here, even though I have a tattoo of Superman on my arm, I'm going to go with Kill Bill Volume 1 on this one. I think, it's the more solid movie between the two. So that's going to go on to the next round here. Now, this is an interesting choice here. We have Captain America the Winter Soldier versus Apocalypse Now. Captain America the Winter Soldier was probably the first time that Marvel Studios showed that, they were going to do things slightly different compared to what we had expected at that particular time. They were going to take some chances. They weren't going to exactly play it safe like a lot of the early movies were, and I think The Winter Soldier will go down as one of the better Marvel movies because of that. Apocalypse Now, of course, is one of Francis Ford Coppola's greatest movies, and that says a lot for a guy who made The Godfather and The Godfather 2. I mean, he's one of the greatest movie makers in history, and I did get a chance to see Apocalypse Now in theaters, and if you do get a chance, that is the way to see that movie, because you will totally get immersed and lost in that world as you're going along here. And honestly, between the two here, it is kind of unfair. Even though Captain America has the higher seed here, I'm going to have to go with Apocalypse Now, so we do have an upset. Again, Captain America the Winter Soldier is a great movie, but in this particular case, putting it up against Apocalypse Now was not fair. Now we are at the end here of the first round. We got one more matchup to go. That is The Empire Strikes Back versus Goldfinger, and this is another tough battle. I mean, The Empire Strikes Back speaks for itself, of course. Considered by many to be the best Star Wars movie. It gave us the iconic, no, I am your father scene. And then Goldfinger, of course, was the first Bond movie that really set the template for what James Bond was able to do. I mean, because Dr. No and From Russia with Love had moments, but they didn't get the formula quite right. Goldfinger was the time where they had the formula right. And between the two, oh boy, I'm going to go with The Empire Strikes Back. So this leads us to round two. I'm going to read off here what the matchups are going to be here for round two. We have Avengers Endgame, the number 1 seed, facing off against the number 8 seed, Die Hard. The number 4 seed, The Matrix, is going to face off against the number 12 seed, The Blues Brothers. The number 2 seed, E.T., is going to face off against the number 10 seed, Kill Bill Volume 1. And finally, the number 14 seed, Apocalypse Now, is going to face off against the number 6 seed, The Empire Strikes Back. All right, let's get round two underway here. We got Avengers Endgame facing off against Die Hard. Like I said, Avengers Endgame, I'm going to have some great memories for the rest of my life based on how the audience reacted during that scene. It was the most beautiful experience I ever had watching a movie myself, but overall Die Hard has meant a lot to me over the years. I think of the portal scene in Avengers Endgame, but I also do think that it was kind of a long movie too, and there were some points where it's just like I was looking at my watch. Yet when it comes to Die Hard is very economical in a lot of ways. I mean, it even though compared to modern action movies it's a little slower, it's very economical. Things are done really well. So gonna have to go with another upset here, folks. Die Hard goes on to the next round. Now we have The Matrix, the number 4 seed, versus the Blues Brothers. And again, The Matrix, one of those iconic actions scenes, introduced the world to kung fu type of choreography in movies, which hadn't really been as prevalent in America before. But the Blues Brothers, again, like I said, it's a movie that kind of opened the door for to get the general public listening to some music that they hadn't listened to in a while. But, I got to think about both of these movies here and which one is going to be the most iconic if I have to pick and choose between the two. For as much as I love the Blues Brothers, I got to give it to The Matrix here. So The Matrix goes on to the next round to face off against Die Hard. Next matchup here, we have E.T. facing off against Kill Bill Volume 1. And again, E.T., very much set the plate for what I like in a movie. I love escapist movies, and E.T., one of the best movies ever made for a reason. Kill Bill Volume 1, though, is kind of in that same boat for me. Again, one of the best action movies ever made. And, if you think about the fight between the Bride and Crazy 88s alone, that's legendary for what it is. And, oh boy, I gotta say this. I think we're having an upset here. Kill Bill Volume 1 is going to go on to the next round. For as much as I love E.T., I think at the end of the day, Kill Bill has done more for me as a movie fan than E.T. has, with my other creative interest here and whatnot. But let's finish the last matchup here in the second round, and that's the number 14th rank Apocalypse Now versus the number 6th rank The Empire Strikes Back. And again, both classic movies. Francis Ford Coppola and George Lucas, of course. For anybody that's a fan of film, knows that they have history together. Francis Ford Coppola, was able to actually get George Lucas his first Hollywood film, THX 1138. So they definitely have history together, of course. But these two are also different types of films. And something to keep in mind, what most people casual movie fans may not realize, is that, believe it or not, Apocalypse Now was supposed to be made by George Lucas back in the day. He had ideas of turning it into kind of like a 16 millimeter, like a documentary type of film. So it would have definitely looked a lot different than what Francis Ford Coppola ended up doing with it. But, George Lucas definitely had his hands on it. I gotta say, though, The Empire Strikes Back in this particular case for me is going to get the nod. It's going to get the nod alone because at the end of the day, I prefer movies that you can watch again and again. And Apocalypse Now is a great movie to watch once. But once you watch it once, and especially if you watch it in the theater, you're going to get the full experience, and you're not going to have to, necessarily experience that again. In a lot of ways, it's like a Schindler's List. Schindler's List is a great classic movie, but again, it's not exactly one you're going to be putting on again and again compared to something like The Empire Strikes Back. So we are here at the final four, folks. This is the semifinals. The semifinals are the number 8 seed Die Hard facing off against the number 4 seed The Matrix, and the number 10 seed Kill Bill Volume 1 facing off against the number 6 seed The Empire Strikes Back. All right, let's get the final four underway here, folks. We have number 8 Die Hard facing off against number 4 The Matrix. Like I mentioned, both classic movies here. In this particular case, I'm going to have to go with the one that I think has had the bigger impact. In this particular case, it's going to be Die Hard. The Matrix is definitely a classic movie, like I said, as far as the action genre goes, and it definitely did introduce people to the Hong Kong way of how to do an action scene, and American films have definitely benefited for that. At the end of the day, the Die Hard formula is just better. Why is it better for me? Because again, this is just my favorites. There is no wrong answer here. For me, Die Hard, even though it's an action movie that has a heightened reality, it still is set in a world that I can relate to because it feels real. Whereas The Matrix is even more of a heightened reality and more abstract. It's not as real. That does not make it bad. I'm not saying that, but it's just like Die Hard could happen more realistically than something like a Matrix could. The Matrix is, sci-fi for a reason. Again, both classic films. In this particular case, I gotta go with Die Hard. The second matchup here is going to be Kill Bill Volume 1 versus The Empire Strikes Back, and in a lot of ways, both these films have some similarities. Like I mentioned, Tarantino in a lot of ways did for film what George did for, action and crime films, what George Lucas did with Space operas, and both of these films do end in massive cliffhangers, and both mean so much to me. The Empire Strikes Back alone, if it weren't for that movie, I wouldn't have the name of one of my children. So this is really, really tough decision here, folks, which is why I'm bloviating with my words, so I have extra time to think about my decision. But at the end of the day, this is controversial, and I can't believe I'm doing this. I gotta go with Kill Bill Volume 1. Empire Strikes Back is a movie that has meant a lot to me over the years, but I think for my taste, where they are today, Kill Bill Volume 1 is the superior movie. And, a month from now, a year from now, that could definitely change. But for now, Kill Bill Volume 1 goes to the finals, and what we're looking at is Die Hard versus Kill Bill Volume 1, and not really a big surprise here on my end. The types of movies that I do like are more along the action side. I've made no secret about that, and both of these are classics for a reason. Die Hard is considered to be the greatest action movie of the 80s, one of the greatest action movies of the 80s. There are other great ones from that era as well, but this one is one of the few from the era that, you could reasonably put that movie in theaters today and it would still be good compared to something like a Chuck Norris movie, for instance. But Kill Bill Volume 1 has its own little greatness to it as well, even though it's kind of with Tarantino, you get what you get with him. It's not like a traditional action movie, but oh boy, this is another tough one here, and I'm gonna have to go with Kill Bill Volume 1, ladies and gentlemen. Die Hard, for the longest time, I had to say, was one of my favorite movies, but just thinking about impact of these movies on me over the years, I think Tarantino has had a bigger effect than what John McTiernan and Bruce Willis did for me, and that is saying something here. So, the winner of Tim Jousma's favorite movie tournament is the number 10 seed, Kill Bill Volume 1, and that does kind of shock me, folks. But again, not a bad choice. None of the movies on this list are bad choices either. Again, we needed content this week, so it's fun to be able to have little activities like this to be able to discuss your favorite movies, but the fun part about this too is that even if I took this same list a month from now and recorded this a similar episode, I'd probably have a different answer for you. But anyway, Kill Bill Volume 1, classic movie. It's won the tournament this week, so we thank you all for listening, and tune in again to another episode of Friends Talking Nerdy, and remember to listen to the other shows in the Friends Talking Nerdy podcast network as well, whether that's Hump Day with Tim and the Professor, which you can hear every Wednesday. You have the TNT Review with myself and the Reverend Tracy, and we're currently in the middle of reviewing F is for Family Season 1, and we also do have their Voices podcast as well, my sister's podcast on genealogy, which is a good one. And we can announce this here, folks. We do have plans of another podcast debuting on the Friends Talking Nerdy podcast network here within the next month or so, and that is a solo project of mine, and it's kind of a spin-off of what you've heard on Friends Talking Nerdy before. In the past, we've done Friends Talking Nerdy Radio Theater, and I have enjoyed that. And I know there is a market out there for old-time radio podcasts, but thinking about it, having old-time radio episodes randomly pop up on the Friends Talking Nerdy feed is not what people are looking for when it comes to old-time radio shows. So we're just going to simply make the Friends Talking Nerdy Radio Theater segment into its own show. And people are like, how do you have all this time for all these shows? For the old-time radio stuff, it's not going to be time-intensive to create, a month or two's worth of shows. So this is not a big project I'm taking on, but it's one I'm really, really excited about because I do love old-time radio. Like any form of media, not everything needs to be saved, and not everything from an older era is going to be good, but that doesn't mean there's bad stuff either, and hopefully I will be able to find some stuff for y'all to enjoy that you may not have thought about just because of the age or something like that. So We got a lot of great stuff in the works here with the Friends Talking Nerdy Podcast Network. Most importantly, head to friendstalkingnerdy.com. Any sort of updates that we're going to have, we're going to be able to put on our website as well. And you're going to find out where we are all at on social media. Also, too, for Hump Day with Tim the Professor, we have started a new gimmick. We start the show out with a themed playlist, and if you're interested in hearing some music that inspired particular episodes for Hump Day with Tim the Professor, you can find those playlists on friendstalkingnerdy.com, so we hope you all check that out. So I think we'll wrap it up here. Tim's favorite movie tournament is complete, and Kill Bill Volume 1, directed by Quentin Tarantino and written by Quentin Tarantino, has surprisingly won over Die Hard. That shocks me as well, folks. So thank you all for listening. Each Saturday in this podcast space, we will have something to entertain your ear holes. Until we meet again, we bid you adieu.
Subscribe to Friends Talking Nerdy on iTunes, the Google Play Music Store, as well as Spotify. Remember to support Friends Talking Nerdy on Patreon. Goodbye, darling.